Hi, everyone. Well, first, I just want to start out by saying, I'm really shocked by how many people watched my last video. Uh, I really expected 10 or 20 people to see it, and then years down the line, somebody else with aphantasia would find it and be kind of relieved somebody else is experiencing the same thing. So I'm just shocked. But the comments have been wonderful, and I thank you so much for them. It's really been very thought-provoking for me and kind of examining myself and and it's really helping me get through this, discussing it with so many people. So thank you so much. My first video when I made it, I was still in such shock, really whether this is all real or not. So it's a bit rambling, and now after all the comments that I've received, I'm really stepping back and really thinking the best way that I can explain kind of how my brain works. So today what I wanted to do was make a video about that, how I assume my brain is working. Obviously, we're kind of going into uncharted territory here because there's not really a lot of information about this. So I'm going to try my best to make it as clear as I can. But it is like we're speaking two different languages, right? Because I cannot fathom what is going through your head when you speak, and obviously mine is not what you're used to either. So we will muddle our way through and try our best. So the first thing I wanted to kind of think about is this idea that there's different ways that thoughts can manifest in our head, right? So you guys are used to the pictures and the sounds and maybe even taste and smells and touch. You can remember these things. But my thoughts don't manifest that way. My thoughts are more manifesting as a knowing sense. I just know they're there, even if the other five senses doesn't work for them. So I was thinking, I've mentioned this in some comments to people, but I think if maybe you think of it as like Braille. So if you can't read Braille and you come across it, you don't really know what it's saying, right? It could be a menu, it could be a textbook, it could be Harry Potter. If you don't know how to read that language, it doesn't mean anything to you. And if you weren't familiar with Braille at all, you wouldn't even recognize that it is a language at all. So I think if that helps to think my thought process is using some different way to communicate. The information is still there, but it's just manipulating it differently. I'm afraid with my first video, maybe it came across that I'm kind of like Data from Star Trek, and I don't have any, emotions or feelings or this kind of thing. And that's, it's not the case. I still feel sad. I still feel regret. I still feel embarrassed for ridiculous things I did when I was a kid. I have all of those things, but the way my brain is processing them and sharing them, I guess, is different. Okay? So I wanted to start with the idea of having a conversation. So my husband and I kind of work through this. He's helping me to see if what I'm saying kind of makes sense, since I can't visualize and really get what you guys are doing. So we decided to start with a conversation. And what we've determined is we both speak in the same way. When I'm speaking right now in this conversation with you, I'm not working out every sentence I'm going to say in my head, right? I'm just doing my thought speak, right? My thought is just coming straight out of my mouth, and that's how I'm speaking. And he said, your speaking is the same. I'm sure there's probably situations where you do work every sentence out, but in a casual conversation with a friend, you would not. You would just thought speak. Now, the difference seems to be in how we listen. So I was asking him, for example, what is the best vacation we took? What do you think? The best vacation we took? And so he said when he's listening to me say that, he starts getting images of the vacations that we went on. And then when it's his turn to speak, he's using those images to feed into his thought speak, and then he's saying things. So he's still not planning out every word he's saying, but he's using those images to give them the idea of what to talk about. Now, for me, when I'm listening to somebody speak, my mind is silent. There's no sound, there's no picture, there's no buzzing, there's no nothing. I assume for you guys, it's like being in a sensory deprivation tank, right? Like Stranger Things. Anyway, so there's nothing, but I don't want to say it's blank or it's empty, because I am taking in all the same input that you would be. Okay, so it's not empty, it's just silent. And then when it's my turn to speak again, my brain has worked out subconsciously on its own what is appropriate for me to say. So I would make the correct response, like, oh, my favorite vacation was when we went blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I'm doing the same thought process as you. The input is the same, but the language that's shooting out in my brain to think is different. I don't project my images into my head. That's the only thing that's different, right? So like that other video that say it's like a computer without a monitor, it's like this. So some people have asked me, like, if I have a filter, do I just say the first thing that comes to my head? Well, yes and no. I do say exactly what comes to my head, but my mind is filtering it for me subconsciously. I don't have to actively make it be kind, right? I know the things that are appropriate and not appropriate to say, and my brain knows these things. So it will make whatever filtering is necessary, it will do it for me. The same, like if I wanted somebody else to ask me, like, if I can lie. Of course I can lie. I'd rather not if I can help it, but I can. And again, it's just happening subconsciously in my mind. It's doing it for me. And then I just say it. I might still get that feeling in the pit of my stomach, like, oh man, I feel really bad about lying. I still get that. But I'm just not listening to or seeing the thought process making it. So I was thinking maybe a good comparison for you would be, if you decide you want to leave your house, you have to walk outside. Do you tell your legs, okay, left leg, right leg, left leg, right leg? You don't need to do that. You know where you want to go, and your brain makes your limbs do this. It's the same for me for all of my thoughts. My brain knows what I need it to do, so it just does it, and then it just comes out. So either I speak it, or I write it, or whatever. So does that help? Hopefully. Now, the other thing I get a lot of questions about is how I read. Okay, now in my last video, I was kind of thinking about this, and I mentioned this thing, like I can force an inner voice. But the more I think about it, the more I speak with people and I read your comments, it is not an inner voice at all. So I think it's a misnomer to say that. Some people have called it a milk voice, where it's like, you know, you have the milk in your throat, so when you talk, it doesn't sound like a voice really. But I don't think that's a very good word either, because I think we need to take voice out of it, because it has no pitch, it has no timbre, it really has no sound. It's like my brain is expecting a sound. So I want to call it like a thought rendering. Okay, so it's like how my thought thinks sounds could be produced, like an echo of a sound. So my example for this one is, did you ever see that GIF where there's the power lines and they're like playing jump rope? Do you remember this one? It went around the internet 2 or 3 years ago. And the interesting thing about it was, when you had the pole jump and he hit the ground, it reverberated. And even though there was no sound, you would still hear the sound. Do you remember this one? So it's like your brain expects the sound, so it makes the sound for you. Even though it's not there, your brain expects it so much, it's already made that connection. So for me, when I'm reading in my head, it's not a voice, it's not a sound, it's like an expectation of that sound, or a thought rendering. I suspect, and obviously this is just an idea, when you're growing up and you're learning to read, you know, you get the read alouds. The teacher reads the story to you. So you're used to associating a sound with a word. So I think it's the same idea with the power lines, and you expect there to be a thud because of the reverberation, and you know it's heavy. So I think my brain expects there to be a sound, but there's not a sound, so it's creating its own thought rendering. Now for me, when I read, it's much faster than I could ever speak. And it's much faster than I could read out loud. The words kind of, not completely on top of each other, but like overlap. So like I would start the next word before the first word is done. I had an image for this. My husband said it doesn't make sense, but maybe you'll think it does. You know, like when your printer's messed up and it starts like putting the words on top of each other, it's kind of like this idea. So I get the words kind of in a mash, but they, you know, my mind slows them down and gets the information. So I hear that same thought rendering when I'm typing or writing. As I'm writing the word, you know, I hear it. But because it's faster than I can obviously type or speak, you know, sometimes I have to stop and like, go back. Wait. You know, it was way ahead of me. Okay. So it's also that thought rendering is also what I use for like daydreaming, which I'm going to talk about in another video because I think that's going to take more time. So anyway, so I hope this is helpful. I'm trying my best to really think of the best way that I can explain this stuff because it seems like you guys are really interested. So, you know, I want to feed that interest and I want to help you kind of see what it's like inside this. Because I'm still blown away that it's so different. I guess you go your whole life, everybody thinks like you. So the idea that I have to explain it a different way is kind of, anyway. So hopefully that all makes sense. If you have any questions about that, go ahead and ask. I will really try to answer everybody. There's so many comments on the last video. It's almost like a full-time job answering everybody. And I really don't want to leave anybody out because I think it's so wonderful that this discussion is happening. So for my next video, hopefully it will be about like daydreaming and how I build fantasies and stuff in my head because it seems like there's interest in that too. So hopefully soon I will get that one up. But that's all for this one. And it's been wonderful talking to you guys. So thanks so much for watching. Bye.